You know, we want to go back to New York now. I don't know if we have our guest there, David Monda, political analyst and professor at City University of New York, joining us live from New York to give us some perspective on the situation in Kenya. David, okay, thank you very much. I was concerned a little bit there. Now, you know, let's go back a bit and talk about the fact that you came back from Kenya, and we've seen so many things happening. There have been accusations of people breaking the law, going against the Constitution. Who is keeping the law? Who is breaking the law in Kenya between the government and the opposition?
Ironically, it appears that the government of Kenya is breaking the law. We had a situation where the opposition candidate Raila Odinga instituted what he called a swearing in of himself as the people's president. And ironically, there's nowhere in the Constitution that forbids him from engaging in such an act. However, the government decided to overreact and to declare that this was a treasonous pronouncement, and what eventually ended after that was a summary arrest of opposition figures, including a lawyer called TJ Kajwang, and a deportation of one of the activists who'd sworn Raila Odinga in as a people's president, which was Miguna.
Yeah. Now we saw
at Uhuru Park.
Yeah. One of the first reactions we also saw is the shutting down of the media houses. Of course, the last one of them, Citizen TV, is back on air. But having been there and experienced that, I mean, what does that tell us really about where the country could be going?
I think it tells us that the country could be going towards a very dangerous area, specifically the fact that the rule of law is not being followed. We should not forget that numerous court orders were placed to force the government to reopen these media stations, NTV, KTN, Citizen, and Inoro TV, the four main stations which constitute 70% of the viewership in the country. At numerous times, these court orders were ignored by the very government that claims it stands for the rule of law. Let's also not forget that the activists who were arrested by the police were not brought in court, and their due process rights were violated. They were held for long periods of time, up to 4 to 6 days. And the law states the habeas corpus rights of the accused need to be protected. In other words, they needed to be arraigned in court within 24 hours. So we see a cycle of impunity and violation of the Constitution and rule of law, which is very damaging to democracy in Kenya.
Yes, we've been seeing protests on the streets, including today, where some are protesting against the lack of appointment of more women and those of physical disability. Question is, do you see the government being forced into a position where it might have to kind of pull back and have to sit on the table and negotiate?
That's a difficult question to answer, Vincent, because on one hand, the rule of law is there. It's specific in the Constitution in terms of issues of gender equity, representation of women in our parliament. As it stands right now, that is not in place in terms of women's representation as per the Constitution. And we've seen a cycle of impunity and disregard for the rule of law over the past couple of months or so. So going forward, it really begs the question whether the government will respond and uphold the rule of law. They do have experts in cabinet who understand the law, yet the actions of the government tend to speak otherwise. They tend to speak towards a violation of the rule of law.
Well, it's a conversation that will definitely continue. Professor Monda, thank you very much for joining us today, giving us your perspectives.
Thank you so much for having me.